All right, recording started.
Fantastic. All right, everybody. I want to thank you for joining our MCA Connect Power Platform webinar. Apologize for the last minute changes from the GoToWebinar to the Teams. We just felt Teams would work better for everybody, a little more available. So I ask that for the duration of this webinar, we'll just keep everybody on mute for now. And it looks like, based on what I see, everybody is on mute, so I appreciate that. And that'll allow us to kind of speak a little more clear and avoid any of the background noises. So what we're going to walk through today in terms of the agenda is we're going to cover some introductions. I'm going to start with myself, and then I'll have Rich introduce himself. And here's what we're going to cover. As the webinar title you saw is Building Solutions in the Power Platform, we're going to cover the Power Apps. We're going to cover Power Automate. We're going to cover Power BI, and then we're going to take some of the use cases that we've seen or been a part of, such as a manufacturing use case and a healthcare use case. And as we end this, we'll go ahead and end off with an MCA Connect offering some of the solutions and the best practices we bring. The final part of our webinar will be to cover what we call the app in a day application, mobile application, and Rich will cover that in detail as we go through that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off for introductions. My name is Jansen Davidson. I'm the sales director for MCA Connect for the Power Platform. I've spent the last several years in what we call this low-code environment, this low-code technology platform. So I am not new to Power Apps or other similar technologies. I have a really good background and grasp on the kind of use cases and applications, whether that be a process application, whether that be a mobile application, RPAs and things like that. I have a lot of experience with. So thank you again for joining this webinar. Looking forward to the discussion. Rich, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Weck. Here at MCA Connect, I'm the managing director for the Power Platform practice here. My responsibility here is with MCA is to lead my team in building and designing applications for our customers. So we lead the whole Power implementation side of the Power Platform for MCA Connect. Basically been in this space, the Dynamics C space for ever since version 1. So I've got a lot of experience in building and designing these types of apps. So.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Per the agenda, I just want to cover quickly the Power Platform as an overview. And if you look what Microsoft's done with this Power Platform, you'll be able to appreciate a lot of these components that come as part of it. And you really can break them down into 4 main components within this Microsoft Power Platform. You have the Power BI or business intelligence. This is where a user or users can build out dashboards to report data from various systems. You have the Power Apps component, which is the mobile application component where you can build, map out UIs, user experience and UIs for mobile applications. You have the Power Automate workflow component, which is where we build or you can build the processes. Maybe you have to kick off a notification process or things like that. That would be done in Power Automate. And then you have Power Virtual Agents, which are you probably see more and more of them now, is the chat bots that you see in the bottom of the screen when you're maybe calling customer service or for a company or something like that. The little chat box appears in the bottom window. All of these components here are basically, you can think of them as kind of like designer environments where you would design these various things. Again, Power BI, designing dashboards. Power Apps, designing a mobile application. Power Automate, designing a process. And Virtual Agents, designing behavior-based chatbots and things like that. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to cover those 3 components, Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. The other component we'll touch upon is the data side of Power Apps or the Power Platform, which is what's called the Common Data Service. And then we're going to maybe touch upon data connectors and the AI builder. So again, that's just kind of the overview. I'm going to drill into each one of these in a little bit more detail as we go. Let's start with Power Apps. So as part of the Microsoft platform, Power Platform, we have the ability, users have the abilities, companies have the ability to go ahead and build their own low-code based applications, mobile apps. And Microsoft's done a great job of providing a very easy, what you call we call it WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get design editor, where you're literally dragging and dropping the various components you want to make build into your app. You can also retrieve data into the app and put it into the app. So if I have to build a mobile application and maybe I need to build or connect to an Excel, maybe there's some pricing information in Excel that I want to present in my mobile app in a certain stage, these connectors are available. Microsoft has spent a lot of time and effort building pretty much every connector a company would have to use or want to use. So in addition to the kind of the apps themselves, or the ability to build the apps, is also connectors to things like other Microsoft software, SAP, Oracle, Excel, SQL, and things like that. Down there below, I provide just a couple of probably a list of that would total close to 300 connectors. So again, most of these, or a lot of these, are part of the platform, and Microsoft's made it easy to map to these connectors and to leverage that data. In addition to the connectors, a lot of businesses within Power Apps, businesses use this again to build processes specific to the mobile app. So when you look at mobile applications and various things that you can build, we've come across warehouse and inventory apps, patient assessment apps, apps that cover manufacturing operations, specifically shop floor. And these apps usually fall into one of two categories. They're either going to be a Canvas app. So if you look at Canvas, think of building an app from scratch, where there's really not a, it's pretty much you're starting from a blank slate. I will add, though, Microsoft has provided templates for the Canvas apps as well. So you might see, if you go onto the Power Apps link, you might see things like a customer service template and things like that. But there are literally hundreds of templates that Microsoft's come out with. So if you don't want to start from scratch, you can leverage some of the templates that they have. They also have model-driven apps for pre-built layouts and a kind of a canned look and feel. So those are pretty much the two forms these apps are going to take: Canvas or model-driven. And on the right side of my screen, you just see something that I kind of pulled together really quick for this webinar, just to kind of show you how easy it is just to kind of drag and drop these various elements. This was a Canvas app that I started, again, around this COVID-19 kind of use case that we'll get into a little bit later. But I was literally able to drag and drop those various components onto the screen so that I can take maybe what's being done by paper right now and move it quickly into a more of a mobile-friendly technology and environment. So we just covered Power Apps. Let's move to Power Automate. Power Automate is where we're going to be able to create and manage automated workflows. These workflows can be between apps, synchronizing files. So let's say I got some information in Excel and I want to automatically update and put it to SharePoint. That's something we could do within Power Automate. We also have the idea of scheduled workflows. Maybe we need to pull data from a SQL database every morning at 2 a.m. for whatever reason and put it somewhere else. That could be a scheduled workflow. So again, with Power Automate, we're relieving the need and dependency on manual operations, manual process, and we're automating those, again, either automatically or on a scheduled basis. We have the idea of UI flows. This is where we get into a little bit of RPA, or robotic process automation, specifically for legacy systems. Another great thing Microsoft has done is they've made contingency and have made companies, whether hospitals, manufacturing, whatever it may be, if they're on older legacy systems, we can still certainly leverage those systems and within the Power Automate and the Power Platform. We also have the idea of business process flows. So unlike these automated workflows, business process flow really helps drive more user behavior. If you've got, let's say, a technician out in the field and they have to follow certain steps before they execute a work order, we have the ability to start driving that process and what's more business process oriented. Again, so we can drive as we're building, let's say, a Power App, the UI side of it, we're actually calling a Power Automate flow behind the scenes so that we're actually directing the user or the technician what they need to do and when they need to do it. Power BI, a lot of very common tool we see used, but what we're seeing here and what the benefit of the Power BI or business intelligence component is, it allows users and companies to aggregate and visualize any data from anywhere. It's been my experience that over time, let's say as companies acquire other companies or just companies just continue to grow, they often adopt other systems, they adopt other maybe ERP systems, back-end systems, and it can quickly become very difficult to manage all that data, let alone visualize the data. This is exactly what Power BI was meant to do, is to allow you to take actionable steps so that you have good data, the analysis of that data and insight. And again, you can work and use that data. So what you see in that left screen, those could be graphs from independent data sources. So it's not necessarily locked into one. Again, Microsoft has made it very easy to visualize and surface the data from these back-end systems. So the final component before we get into some of the use cases is the common data service. So this is a key differentiator for what Microsoft has done within the Power Platform. Again, I've been in other similar technologies with low code, and I've never seen a solution where there is a database component provided for it. So when you build these apps, or if you're using these apps, this data's got to live somewhere. Not every company has a database ready to leverage a new app or things like that. So what Microsoft has done is built, as far as the back end of this, of all these apps, or BI, Power Automate, and Power Apps, is the Common Data Service, which is a database. And it makes it very easy for the users to go ahead and record their data and put it somewhere so that the data can be reported on. In addition, with CDS, or this Common Data Service, we can consume data. We can bring in data into this system. Maybe, again, Excel's very, very popular, and people aren't going to be moving away from Excel anytime soon. But what if we brought the Excel data into more of a common data structure so that we can start to be a little bit more consistent with how data is stored, how it's managed, how it's reported on? Again, key benefit to the Power Platform is the fact that Microsoft has provided this common data service behind it all. So let's go ahead and dive into some use cases, right? I think, again, I just wanted to provide a context of the Power Platform, but I think you're going to see really it's going to hit home when we kind of talk about, okay, how do people actually use this? Where do we start? And I'm going to take a use case of a project I worked on in my past. And this is a shop floor scenario. And for folks that aren't familiar with that, it's just the ability to go ahead, if you're working on something on the shop floor, to be able to report your time and what you're doing and how long you spent on that. What you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen is actually the pictures I took of how this company was doing their shop floor operations. They were just paper-based. The operator would record their shop number, drawing numbers, the time they started the job, the time they ended the job, and kind of the general description of what they did. Obviously, it's paper-based. The problem with this approach is that it allows all kinds of clerical issues, errors to get into the database or to get into the ERP or the back-end system. There were massive inefficiencies surrounding the way they were doing these shop floor reporting. Some of these inefficiencies took the form of just redundant data entry. So in this case, this manufacturing company was taking, the operators would record the shop floor report. That would then have to go to a supervisor to be entered into Excel. And then finally it got typed in manually into the back-end ERP system. So if you look at those steps, there was plenty of opportunity for errors to happen. The other issue was that they could not track direct or indirect cost. on the shop floor. So they couldn't really tell, was this person spending a half hour setting up the equipment, or were they spending a half hour on the actual work order? And that's very, very important information to track and document in the manufacturing world. And last but not least, there was absolutely no transparency into the shop work order progress. So if you were a supervisor or you were a floor supervisor, you had no idea who was working on what, how much scrap had they produced on that assembly line. You couldn't track any productivity of any given assembly line. Again, scrap, couldn't see anything. So there was no way until after a shift was done that you could fix something. And that, I think, is the biggest key to all of this. When you look at the Power Platform and some of the components as part of it, you no longer have to wait till the end of the shift to fix something. You have actionable insight, real-time insight as to what's going on in the floor, manufacturing floor. As people are doing their various operations, they're recording scrap. Oh, we just hit 10 pieces. That might trigger a flow, an alert. Somebody needs to take a look at something. So again, this is an actual use case of something I worked on, moved them to the app, and they recognized and realized massive efficiencies and productivity across the board, just moving to an application-based reporting practice. So this is kind of what the current state looks like of that Power App use case with manufacturing. We took what we have here on the paper, opened up Power Apps, and now it's literally dragging and dropping the data that we want to capture. We connect to the data that we need to report the information into. And now, again, rather than using the paper, it's now being kept and maintained in the app that's updating a database. That's my actual hand there with the app in the bottom of this app running on my phone. So you can see that I'm capturing things like the date, the operator that was scanned in, the work order they're working on, the department they're a part of. It looks like a browsing. I can allow them to browse to drawings specific to that work order. So again, back in the day, let's say several years ago, this would have been a highly customized app that might have taken months to deploy and make use and to see the value of. With a Power Platform and this low-code approach, you're talking more like weeks, not months or years to actually see the value in some of these changes. So let's transition a little bit. I wanted to make sure we addressed and covered something around the healthcare use case. I myself, I'm not an expert in healthcare. So what I did in preparation for this webinar is that I sat down with a friend and neighbor of mine, Dr. Roberto Colon. He's the vice president for quality and safety for Premier Health here in Kettering, Ohio. I live here in Dayton. And so what I did is, I didn't want to make anything up. I wanted something that, the folks here in the audience that could relate to the healthcare side of this. And this is what we discussed. We all know what's going on with COVID-19. One of the challenges that Premier Health here in Kettering had, and I think a lot of hospitals in the area had, is that this literal overnight mandate and requirements. And so we're going to camp out a little bit on the patient assessment side. And so the challenge they're having is that since they had to come up with something overnight, it's this patient assessment or patient screening process right now at some of the entrances of our hospitals, it's all verbal. There's not even paper in some of these. They're not even tracking some of the assessment information on paper. So it's not trackable. You can't report on any of the findings. There's no call to action, and there's no integration to teams. And a lot of hospitals in our area, specifically with Dr. Robert Colon, is that they're all using Teams. They launched into Teams shortly after COVID hit to start, communicating things, around COVID-19 and cases. But the challenge again they're having is we really can't take the information we're getting in these patient screenings and do anything with it. One of the use cases he brought up was, I would like as the vice president of quality and safety, it would be helpful for me to know in like Teams, Microsoft Teams, okay, how many COVID-19 cases are positive? Where are they in the hospital? Or, and start to pull metrics and patterns. He said for someone in his role, it'd be really nice to know if he's got cases that are all increasing on the 6th floor of the hospital. Well, why is that? Why on the 6th floor of the hospital, not other areas? So again, if they had integration to teams, they could probably get a little bit more collaboration going on what's going on in the hospital with some of this COVID-19 related issues. So if you take this use case, and again, we just kind of sat down, Dr. Clone and I sat down and kind of mapped some things out. This is what he would love to see. So what the Power Platform allows you to do is take what you're doing on paper or verbally and just get it out on Power App. So I took 15 minutes with him and said, okay, what kind of information do you want to capture? And this is, you can kind of see the bottom right hand on the right hand side. This is me starting to put those questions so that this could be used on a kiosk. So when people come in, they're using a kiosk to enter the information for some just basic things like, the symptoms that they may be experiencing and so on. So now we're moving towards an app-based solution. And it's it has condition-based triggers for actions and notifications. So if somebody selects, let's look at the bottom there, you can see some of the symptoms. If they start selecting symptoms like I have a fever and a cough, okay, that might trigger a Power Automate flow to go email or do something with that information. Okay, this person cannot be allowed to have surgery. They have COVID symptoms, whatever that use case may be. We now can update back-end systems with this information. So I know a big patient tracking system is Epic. Maybe you want to capture that information in Epic. But the biggest advantage, according to Dr. Clone, in this situation is that this platform would allow him to keep pace with the changes and mandates that are happening with COVID-19. So if something changes tomorrow, which we could really see, that he doesn't have to, he's not looking at he's not looking at weeks, not even really days to accommodate those changes. He's really looking at a matter of maybe hours to implement any changes that happen. So if maybe tomorrow the mandate requires additional questions to be answered, he's in a really good position, or hospitals like him are in a good position to respond very, very quickly. So we're going to, as we kind of draw this presentation to a close, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the MCA Connect component and what we bring to bear in this platform. What we are seeing as a practice and what I have seen in the past is that though this is a low-code platform and a lot of people can leverage its capabilities and power, there are a lot of things to consider. And what we bring as an expert in this solution is we bring 10 years of experience in the Power Platform. We were building apps, deploying apps for customers before it was even called Power Apps. So over the years, we've been able to build a lot of disciplines around the best practices, building and deploying apps and flows and BI dashboards. So what you're going to see and what we help customers with is, hey, before you start doing this on your own, let us coach you, because there's a half a dozen ways to build the same app. And the way one person might build it might have performance issues because they didn't know. Maybe they're hitting the database more than they have to for certain information, or they've built some queries that are just complex, overly complex for the system. Again, not because they don't know how to do it, it's just they don't know maybe the best way to do it within the platform. We bring a lot of expertise into these various industries. What Power Platform has done for us is exposed us to multiple industries, because whether you're manufacturing or healthcare, the issue you're having is probably process related. There's a paper-based process that needs to be fixed. We're working with a company right now that's got onboarding, new employee onboarding issues. They take forever to onboard a new employee, and they want to reduce that to a few days. They have new employees that are showing up, first day on the job, and there's no laptop. There's no access to the building. There's no access to the systems. Why? Because it's form-based, it's paper-based, and those forms and emails are slipping through the cracks. So they're calling upon us to help build some process flows that all of this information gets triggered automatically. We will and often drive our customers to self-sufficiency. We're suggesting that we kind of know through our experience that, the pitfalls and where things can get confusing. And so we can coach our customers on that. So if they do have a mature software development team, if they have a mature IT group, we'll drive those groups so they can build these things themselves, leveraging the best practices that we teach them. If you're looking to build apps and you are a larger company, I'll just say even, let's say 100 or more users, building the app itself, again, probably not too difficult. But what happens if that app changes? What happens if the users use it for 6 months and say, hey, we want to start tracking this, or we want to capture this. Hey, can we add these questions into this part of the app? How do those apps get changed? How do they get from the test environment or dev environment to the test environment to production properly? And how do we make sure that all users get that same version? So there's a change management process that's got to be considered here as well. And again, something that we can provide and offer best practices on. And last but not least, there's all kinds of governance and securities to consider with these apps. What we're seeing is that the folks and companies that are building them themselves, they start running into issues when it comes to the governance and security. And Microsoft has done a fantastic job on the security side, the back end and the cloud where all of this is hosted with Azure. So they have really helped out with that, and with this technology, the governance and securities is really good. But again, these are just some of the things that folks, companies that we've seen, they don't think about or they forget about. And before you know it, if they've got 1,000 users out there, they're running into problems correctly promoting these apps and walking them through a proper change management process and governance process. Okay. So with that, I'm going to end. Before I turn this over to Rich, we're going to go ahead and we're about to go into a demo of the app in a day, where he's going to walk us through an actual app, how it was built, why it was built, and things like that. But time doesn't allow us to go into a lot of detail with this webinar. So if you are interested in taking this a step further, you want to look at a workshop with us, we do offer this. What we do is what we're doing right now with the company with this onboarding process. We get on a call. They share with us the challenges that they're having with a certain process. In their case, it's onboarding. We walk through it with them, show them, their options, and again, just start to build using the Power Platform, building a flow and an app to help address those issues. So it's very inexpensive. It's really a small investment when you kind of consider the long-term picture of what you can do with this app. But again, very inexpensive for us to show you some basics around how to build these apps properly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rich Weck, and he's going to walk us through the app in a day demo. Rich?
Thanks, Jansen. Let me start to share my screen here.
Yep.
Make sure I'm sharing the correct one. All right. So can everybody see my screen at this point?
I can.
All right, Jansen. All right, so our use case today, so I wanted to kind of give a real world use case that just about every business has, which is replenishing or refreshing laptops or computers for their employees. And we offer an app in a day session where we can kind of teach the basics to our customers and prospects of how to build a Canvas app, working with a common data service, building a model-driven app, and using Flow or Power Automate to automate some tasks. And in the span of a day, you actually build this exact application. So you get a taste for how simple it is or how easy it can be to build an application. So this is what we're looking at here is a Canvas app that that allows an end user to pick from a variety of different laptops that the organization may allow them to order to replace one that they're currently using. Now, this is a Canvas-based app, so Jansen mentioned that in the beginning that you start out with a blank slate, and then using the Microsoft connectors and some of the other custom connectors, we can decide what our backend data source is. In this particular situation, we use the Common Data Service, which is that database that is provided by Microsoft. But in a Canvas-based app, the connection could be it could be SharePoint, it could be SAP, it could be some Oracle system, all of the above, all in the same app, and the user could interact with the data directly from this Canvas-based app. Now, the beauty of this Canvas-based app is that it's a develop once or build once. I shouldn't use the term develop. Build once and deploy everywhere. So you don't have to build a different app for what could be on the mobile device or just browser like I'm showing you right now. This exact same app could be embedded directly inside Teams if you're a Team shop. And so it really doesn't matter where it lives. It's a create once and deploy wherever the business chooses to have it. But in this case, this Canvas app, and I'm the administrator, so just so I could show the whole process, but end to end. But typically, the employee would be coming in here and deciding on a couple of laptops that they want to look at, and so they're choosing between their favorite brands. If I choose Acer. This Aspire looks interesting. I can click a checkbox here. We've got a variety of different laptops to choose from. Maybe there's this Iconia, and maybe I know there's a Lenovo IdeaPad that I like. I can choose compare. So I've selected several different laptops to look at, to pick from. So as a user, I just choose compare 4 items. And here, you can see the different devices that I selected. You see some sample pictures, the prices, the RAM, how big what size it is, those types of specs. And then I can choose whichever device that I like. So maybe I decide I want to go with this Aspire. Here's the approver's email. That would probably be my manager. And so normally the manager's email address would probably go right here. And I'm just going to put a little comment. I think this is the best one for me. And this is my username. Normally it would be my name instead of an email address, but for the purposes of this demo, it's just the email address. And I'm going to submit my device request. So what happens here is you get a acknowledgement screen. Thank you. Your device has been successfully submitted. Essentially, what I've done at this point in time is, I've selected my laptop and I've recorded data in our Common Data Service for action. And in just a moment, an administrator, you may have just heard that ding, just received an email notification that a new device was actually requested by one of the users. And you can hear in the email, you can see the date that it was created, some details around it. They're requesting this Acer Aspire U for $1,899. How much the department will contribute, and the comments that you saw me write in that application. Now, as an administrator, I can choose to approve or reject right from within the context of the email. Or if I was using a mobile device, I could get an actual pop-up alert that says, can you approve or reject this? It's entirely, configurable. It's entirely up to you on how you want to make that work. Now, before I approve or reject this, I want to go back and I want to show you what this would look like from the procurement person's perspective. So here's a model-driven app. We like to call this kind of forms over data. And model-driven apps all sit on top of the Common Data Service, always. That's the primary database for this type of application. And here you can see that Aspire U that I just created from my Canvas app. Now, I can see it's the latest one that's in here. And so as the procurement person, I can open up this record and see some additional details. And you can see that I've got this process that I need to follow. Now, this was that business process that Jansen was trying to bring up in his conversation earlier, that as the procurement person, I need to follow a specific process to complete, the ordering of this laptop. Now, normally, the procurement person would not be doing the initial approval, right? It's probably going to be a manager, and so that's the manager that's receiving the email. Right now, you can see the approval status is empty. I can choose to, set it here and then move to the next stage, or, um, if I were the manager, I can just choose approve, reason, yes, go ahead and submit. And then behind the scenes, after a moment, this approval, you'll see on this same record, I'll refresh the screen. So right now the approval status is empty. I'm gonna just refresh the data here. And you can see that the approval status was approved by the manager. So as a procurement person, I can move to the next stage. Well, because of this laptop being over the $1,000 threshold, the procurement team needs to get, additional approval to say, it's over the typical $1,000 amount, will we approve this, yes or no? In this case, I'm just going to say yes. If I would have said no, the end user would have received a notification saying, sorry, we can't approve it because it's over the amount that you're allowed to spend. In the next stage, since we approved it as yes, we can put in a ship date, and the end user, as we move through this, would get email notifications letting him know that his laptop was approved, when he can expect to possibly get it. And then, we can take it even further, although the emails aren't set up, as the device is received, we can continue to follow the process. Was it received? Yes or no? Have we configured it? Yes or no? And so as we are completing these activities in the model driven app, the end user who requested the laptop is being notified. And finally, we can distribute the device and finish. Device was delivered, and send a survey on how he feels about the process today, and we finish it. So we've driven an exact process that we asked the procurement person to go through, from device being requested. Now I did that rather quickly. Normally it would take a couple days, but you can drive the process that the end user needs to go through to complete it. Now you'll notice that this particular one, we had this capital approval, and that was because it was over the $1,000 threshold. If I choose a different device here that is under one that is scheduled a while back, you can see that the actual process is shorter. So all we need to do is go through the approval status, and we can immediately place an order without having to go through some additional capital requests. So these business processes have the ability to be very intelligent based on data that's in the system, and then you move on to the next stage. So along with required fields and such. So same kind of thing. So that's our model driven app and our Canvas based app. Again, both of these types of apps are immediately mobile capable or web browser capable. And then finally, here's where you can see the flows that have been, this is the process that sends the emails out. I can go here and see if there are any approvals. This is another way to go do approvals. So I can choose to, approve or reject, from here if I so decided to. So that's a simple example of our Power Apps. This whole section that you see here, we build with our users in the matter of one day. So we start around 9 o'clock in the morning. We go through how to build the Canvas app, how to use the connectors. Then we work in CDS and we build out some tables, and then finally we create some forms and processes, and within the span of one day, you actually have a working process just like this. So with that, I'm at the end of my demo. Were there any questions that we could talk about. No questions?
Any questions on what anybody's seen, even on the PowerPoints, the demo? We have a few more minutes, so feel free to just ask anything you want, or if you want us to cover something. All right. Okay. Oh, we do have a question here. Got a hand raised.
I was just curious, the common data service now, how exactly is that being accessed in the background? Is that part of a subscriber's Azure portal, or is that something that the designer or IT maintenance person can get in and see? How is that siloed or partitioned if this is being used across all of these different platforms?
So essentially the common data service is just a really powerful SQL Server database that Microsoft has layered a lot of security and ease of use for building forms, views, those types of things on top of it. We use this concept called environments. Let me try to share my screen again, get on a little bit more of the technical side here. We use this concept called environments. So this, I have an environment called dev rich, which is where you saw this app in a day event occur. And so this is using what we call the CDS, and in this CDS is that database where I can add a new table, a new entity or whatever, and then model it out. Now, throughout your organization, you don't want everybody using that same database for whatever it may be, and you provide the security around each and every environment. So an administrator can go in and create additional environments where a CDS instance can live. And so this was from our app in a day, so it's kind of boring and generic here, development lab admin 20, because we had like 90 people in the event. But each environment has its own unique CDS instance, and it's based on the license type that you purchase from Microsoft. So whether or not the CDS is included or not.
All right, thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to ask about that, as you mentioned, the soft floor application. So is there any probability that we can add a hardware outside of the Power Apps and integrate into this Power Apps? And as we know, more IoT device we can include in any business processes, right? So
Right.
Is there any facility available to connect IoT devices with the Power App to control or access and give approval, something like that?
Yeah, because Power Apps is built on the Microsoft Azure stack. All of you can work with IoT data. Obviously, you got to model all that out, but the entire Azure platform is available and usable at your fingertips. So AI, IoT, machine learning, all those various Azure functions that are out there are immediately at your fingertips that you can build and consume and work with inside your apps. Did that answer? Was that what you were asking about there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So we have looks like another question on licensing. So yeah, so the licensing around the use cases, it's licensing, that could be a call in and of itself, but basically it kind of depends on what you have with Microsoft, and Rich, jump in anytime, but basically there's a couple different price points within the apps, and I would even have to check just to make sure, but I believe last it was somewhere around for a power app, if you're building a power app and it's just one app, and you want let's say 5 people to access and use that app, I think it's somewhere around $10 a month per user. Yeah, $10 per user per month for that app. If you build multiple apps and you want users to be able to cross use apps that are built and deployed, that falls into a whole different pricing structure. I think that's somewhere around $40 or so a month per user. So
Correct.
that's the main on the Power App side. On the Power App side, I can talk to that more. In terms of any licensing considerations around flows and notifications, I'm not sure there's any to consider, but that's what I know on the Power Apps use case side. Does that answer your question, Chandresh?
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Very good.
Okay. Well, everyone, if there's no other questions, I just want to again thank you for your time and participating and showing our seeing this webinar. I hope you found it, educational and informative. Feel free at any time here in the next few days, just feel free to reach out if there's something we didn't cover that you'd like to see discussed maybe in more detail. If you want to reach out to us, you've got a use case. I heard a couple already. I like the IoT use cases that I heard. We can most certainly dive into that maybe a level deeper. But again, just feel free to reach out to us. You should have our contact information. If not, I'll make sure Brittany sends out an email and just giving you ways to get a hold of us. So with that, if there's nothing further, I'm just going to go ahead and conclude the webinar. And again, thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.